Welcome to this October 13th edition of the Paperboyz. We're the Courier Sports Department, or at least part of it. I'm Doug Newhoff. To my left is Jim Sullivan, and to my right is Jim Nelson. It's a great time of the year to be a sports fan with all the things that are going on, and the season's kind of overlapping a little bit. We've got plenty to cover, so let's get right into it, guys. Our college football teams from the state last week had an interesting weekend. You and I went up to North Dakota State, lost a 31-28 game. Iowa won a big game at home against Illinois, 29-20. And Iowa State couldn't quite keep up with the old juggernaut from Texas Tech and dropped that one 66-31. This week, you and I finally gets to come back home. It's been a while since the Panthers have played in the Dome. I know they're looking forward to that, but they host Western Illinois Saturday, and then we've got Iowa playing over at Northwestern. That's a pretty interesting matchup. Northwestern is off to a good start, as is Iowa, so that's a good game to keep an eye on. And then we've got Iowa State up against another one of those high-powered, explosive offenses at home in Ames. They host TCU this week, so some interesting football games coming up. But let's start with the TCU at Iowa State game. How do you keep up with an offense like TCU or Texas Tech last week?
I think the simple answer is you don't. It's becoming increasingly difficult for a lot of reasons. Obviously, talent would be one. Just overall athleticism and speed would be another. And the way the game is officiated and the rules that are in place now, it's very, very tough to shut down an offense with all the short passes and the rub routes that are run. And like I said, just the fact that these teams are so good at it. One key to shutting out a TCU or a Texas Tech or Baylor is try to limit yards after catch, and that's can only take you so far. I mean, they're going to score some points on you, but you can still maybe keep them, make them go longer to score drives, hope for some turnovers, hope for some mistakes. And from what Paul Rhodes was saying on Monday, the Iowa State, among other things, didn't really do that. They couldn't stop the big play, and the real killer, I think, to me, was they made some mistakes early. Specifically the Richardson interception. They really needed to stay in the game all the way through. Although they were within 17-14 at one point in the second quarter, some of the damage had been done. Paul Rhodes said in his press conference Monday that he thought his team was intimidated by Tech's speed, the pace of the game, and never really recovered from that. So the task does not get any easier this weekend with TCU coming in, and the numbers are just mind-boggling. I mean, you look at Iowa State's averaging 421 yards of total offense. That's not bad. That should get it done. Bad news is TCU's averaging 615. That's 200 yards more per game than what a good offense is averaging. TCU has not allowed a sack in the last 3 games. They've gone 19 straight games scoring a first quarter touchdown. And above all that, they have the second longest national winning streak at 14. So Iowa State, once again, has its hands full this weekend, and they're going to need some help, some mistakes. Big game for Mike Warren, and maybe that might not even be enough to have him stay in the game.
And it's just amazing how fast things change in these games too. I mean, like you said, Iowa State, I was flipping back and forth between channels Saturday while I was working, and not really watching very closely, but catching a little bit here and there. And I look up and it's 17-14 in the Iowa State Texas Tech game. I come back 15 minutes later and look up, or 10 minutes later, and it's 31-14. And then they show Texas Tech's got 450 some yards, and I'm thinking, oh, they must be getting into the third quarter. The game must be plugging along. Well, it's not even halftime yet.
No.
I mean, it's incredible.
It really is. And somewhere in there, I don't remember which drive it was, Tech converted, I think, a 3rd down and 30. I believe they scored that, and it's of course Iowa did that to Iowa State too. So it's kind of a chronic problem. But along those lines too, and this has nothing to do with Iowa State per se, but Baylor and Kansas were playing at about the same time, and Kansas is actually tied with Baylor, I think, in the first quarter, and a few minutes later they're up 49 points. It's just once these teams get rolling, they're almost impossible to stop.
Yeah, it's fun to watch, but I sure would hate to be a defensive coordinator in the Big 12 these days. Holy cow!
Yeah, it's tough.
You're a Gopher guy. So the Gophers are the only team this season that's played TCU close. I mean, did you see any of that game?
I did. I don't have a good explanation for it, other than the fact that TCU might have been trying to work some of the kinks out. I think they were close to breaking the game open on a couple of occasions, and didn't do it. And seriously, the Gopher defense deserves some credit for that. They are a pretty solid defensive team. Not so much on offense. They've been struggling all year on that side of the ball. They struggled there too. So I think there was a combination of things. Although, I mean, Texas Tech played TCU pretty tough the other way. That was a 55-52 game, if I'm not mistaken.
And I thought Kansas State should have beat them this weekend. They were up late, and what was it? I can't think of the final score. But they were up late. TCU scores. Kansas State's got the ball. They've been grounding and pounding all day long. They've only thrown like 20 passes, and there's like 2 minutes left in the game, and they're still up by 4, I think. And they came out and they threw 3 straight times, and then punted. And TCU got the ball and scored in like 2 plays. And I was so shocked they didn't run the clock. And I'm watching this game, and I go, Kansas State's got them. And it didn't. It was like totally out of Bill Snyder, game plan. I couldn't believe they came out and they threw the ball 3 times, basically with a quarterback that didn't even start in high school, and wasn't the starting quarterback at the start of the year. He was the JV quarterback in high school. And, but anyway, it was an interesting game. But TCU, I just fun watching them play. I mean, because again, Kansas State gave them just a little gap, and they took it.
Yeah, and the Texas Tech, I mean, we know what kind of offense they have, so that was the classic shootout that whoever had the ball last was probably going to win. I don't know for a fact how they shook out, but
One of a deflected pass in the last minute, scored a touchdown. The pass was tipped and then caught at the back of the end zone.
so there you go.
So they find a way.
All right, let's move over to the Iowa and Northwestern game. Northwestern's an interesting team, off to a 5-1 start. Lost last week to Michigan, 38-0. Got it handed to them pretty good, but beyond that, they've been pretty good this season. What do you guys know about the Wildcats and what the Hawkeyes are up against?
Well, I tell you what, Pat Fitzgerald for a long time has had Kurt Ferentz's number, so this is going to be a tough one for Iowa. But I think Northwestern is, I think they're playing a freshman quarterback. He's playing lights out, and they just get it done. They play good football, and Iowa, on the Iowa side, they found ways to win. But it's going to be interesting what Iowa's going to do. They're going to be without Drew out this week, and as I understand, they're going to be without both tackles. Boone Myers and Ike Butker are both hurt, and they might not play this week.
Yeah, I got an update on Butker. His father is a pastor at a local senior care center, and he's holding out hopes that Ike's going to be able to play this week, but he does have an ankle that's bothering him a little bit. The interesting thing about Northwestern is I look at their schedule, and yes, they beat Stanford in their opener, and they handed it to Minnesota 27-0, but their other wins are against Eastern Illinois, Duke, and Ball State, which doesn't knock me off my chair by any means. So, I'm not quite sure exactly what the Wildcats are made of.
It's sort of like Illinois all over again, really, because we didn't really know what Illinois was going to bring to the table. As it turned out, they competed reasonably well, not well enough to win, but they stuck with Iowa for most of that game. It's one of those matchups, Iowa-Northwestern, that is where something has to give. Iowa's the number 2 scoring team in the Big Ten at 31.7, which is kind of funny if you think about it compared to what we've just been talking about. And Northwestern's the number 3 scoring defense at 17-2. Northwestern's number 2 in rush offense. Iowa's number 2 in rush defense. The two teams are tied red zone defense. And on top of all that, Iowa's lost its last 2 games in Evanston. So it's a little hard to say exactly where Northwestern is for the reasons you said, Doug. I think it's going to be a little bit like the Wisconsin game, low scoring, physical. The team that makes the fewest mistakes is likely to win. And given what we just discussed with Iowa's offensive line, you wonder if that can hold up. And then the other question with Iowa is how much of the workload can Jordan Canzeri handle? It looks like it's either going to be him or nobody, because you look at their Big Ten rushing attempts. They have 91. Canzeri has 69. C.J. Beathard has 14. That's it. They don't either because Daniels is hurt. They don't have another guy they trust, or they just want to go with Canzeri.
I don't think they have a lot of trust in Derek Mitchell or Wadley, Akeem. I can't pronounce his first name, but the Wadley kid. So it'll be interesting to see how many carries Canzeri gets this week. And if I can't go, James Daniels had his struggles early, and then I think he settled in a right tackle there, replacing Ike. So it'll be interesting. But the Iowa defense has been playing good, and they bent, and then they make a play. And I tell you, you watch the Decorah native Josie Jewell, he's really coming to his own this year.
He's good. Yeah, I was going to have some cards stacked against them this week. So in order to get to what 8-0, is that what they're shooting for this week?
7-0.
7-0. It's going to be a big challenge, but they should get bigger. I mean, the longer you take that undefeated record into the season, the bigger the challenge you should get. So that'll be fun to watch over there. Let's move on to the Western Illinois UNI game. We all know a little bit about Western Illinois because their head coach is Bob Nielsen, who spent 5 years, I believe, at Wartburg and was pretty successful there. And then went on to Minnesota Duluth, a Division II school, and actually built a powerhouse up there over 10 seasons. I think they won a couple of national championships. He's in his third year at Western. Now he's got that program playing pretty well. They're undefeated in the Missouri Valley Football Conference with a couple of wins, and they're 3-2 overall. They took Coastal Carolina, which is currently ranked number 1, right to the Final Horn. Pulled out a last-second win over Southern Illinois. Handled South Dakota pretty well last week. What's this matchup look like this week?
Coach Farley said, back even when you look back, to their bye week, and you look at and what was facing them, Illinois State, North Dakota State, and he thought Western might be one of the more dangerous, just because of what UNI would be coming off and how they were playing. Maybe that's coach speak, trying to warn his team that this team's good, but I think they're pretty good. They got a veteran quarterback who's just went over 6,000 career passing yards, and then Nico Watson, their running back, just went over 2,000 career rushing yards. I mean, they got some offensive weapons, and Coach Farley mentioned that this defense, it's not much different last year, but they have better athletes, and it's a much better unit than what they had last year. It's gonna be another whale of a game with UNI coming off 2 losses. They need this one. They're finally coming home. It seems like we have been on the road for a long, long time, and.
The thing you worry about in this game is, there was so much talk about those first 5 games and what a brutal run that was. It would only be natural for those kids on that UNI team to take a deep breath and say, I'm glad that's finally over, and not maybe be at the same level for this game as what they need to be. And I'm sure that's part of what you're talking about with coach speak. I know Coach Farley is trying to protect against some of that this week and make sure they realize that just because they got through those 5 games, the next 5 aren't going to be any easier. And it starts this week, so his challenge is to keep those guys playing at the same level of intensity that they've played in the last 2 weeks and take care of business here. Interesting stat that did jump out at me about Western Illinois is perhaps there's an opportunity to get something done against them on special teams. They have given up 27 yards per kickoff return, I believe it is, this season, and 18 yards per punt return. So you can swing the field position against them with your special teams, and that might be a place that Northern Iowa can take advantage of and make some headway this weekend.
Go ahead.
You could say UNI is kind of doing that. They haven't had a big long punt return yet, and they haven't really had a big kickoff return yet either. They haven't really broken. They didn't even get a chance against North Dakota State. I think every one of those kicks went out of bounds or through the end zone. So they haven't really got a chance to return any kickoffs. But the punt things, they haven't had a big return yet. Maybe they're long probably this year, like 12 yards or something like that. So they're due for one of those. And they may be due for a block. They missed a couple of blocks at Illinois State just by the fingertips. So yeah, they are doing special teams.
If anyone, Mark Farley wanted to use this as a warning sign for his team, and I'm not sure they will, all he would have to do is point to 2 years ago after UNI barely lost at North Dakota State and played South Dakota the next week. And I think he went up big on that game, then blew it and lost in overtime. The situations aren't quite parallel, aren't quite similar, because I think this Western Illinois team is much better than that South Dakota team. I think UNI is going into this post-Indiana game in better shape physically than it did 2 years ago, although Cole Morgan suffered concussion at that point as well. Other than that, these 2 teams live in about the same neighborhood statistically. They're 7-8 in scoring offense, 7-8 in scoring defense, flipping, flopping, in Western Illinois being in top offense, UNI in defense. The big advantage UNI has is in rushing offense. They're 4th, average just under 200 a game, and Western Illinois is 9th, so maybe there's something to be said there. Western Illinois does have a pretty good return guy. I think it's Lance Lenore, the name is, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Very good on punt returns, kickoff returns, a very good receiver. So that's something to watch. But this should be Bob Nielsen's best team. It's his third year, and if you look at the last 2 times they played United, they were very competitive in those games. I think they were both maybe about 2 touchdowns, but
I think 27-14 last year.
yeah. And but in both cases, I thought Western represented itself pretty well. They were in the game, just didn't really stay close enough to win at the end. But I think all the warning signs should be up for this one for you and I.
A must win. I mean,
Yeah.
quite simply, you don't want to get your 4th loss, and you don't want to be 0-3 in the Missouri Valley Football Conference. They got to find a way to get it done and get on a roll now and see if they can win out, which should get them a pretty good playoff seed and perhaps a first-round bye or at least a home game. So they've got their work cut out, but this is one of the better UNI teams that we've seen again. They're good. They do a lot of things well, and they're just a victim of their schedule a little bit and their own inability to finish a couple of games that they probably should have. So it's time to get this thing turned around and make some headway and get back to where they need to be. High school football, we have a couple of really marquee type games this week. The schedule has Cedar Rapids Jefferson at Waterloo East, Waterloo West plays at Linn-Mar, Columbus heads up to North Fayette Valley, and then we've got these 2 other games that really jump out at me. Cedar Falls has to make a trip to Cedar Rapids Kennedy Friday night. Kennedy's ranked 4th. They've been really good the last 5 weeks. I think they've given up 2 touchdowns, maybe 3 touchdowns in their last 5 games with a couple of shutouts and scored a lot of points. So the Tigers are kind of in a position where they need a win. They lost to Linn-Mar last week, which was a little bit of a surprise, I think. And now they've got their work cut out heading down here to Kennedy.
One thing about Cedar Falls in the past is always has aimed and often succeeded at playing its best football right at the end of the year when they needed to get not only in the playoffs and then make a run in the playoffs. Excuse me, I'm not sure you can say that right now, although we do have 2 games left. Linn-Mar really exposed them in a couple of ways last Friday. One, they put a lot of pressure on Cedar Falls with blitzing defenses. Cedar Falls did not handle that particularly well, and they didn't really have a consistent answer for it in the passing game. A lot of fade routes, a lot of quick throws to the sidelines. And it was effective at times, but not really. The rushing game was slowed down by Linn-Mar, although DeGroot did not play. Yeah. And I think that really hurt Cedar Falls. But Linn-Mar, like a couple other teams this year, really moved the ball well on the Tigers. Their quarterback was impressive. Their receivers were good. They didn't drop many balls and put on a nice display of offensive football, I think, to win that game after being down 14. Kennedy is a very, very good team. They have one of the best rushers in the state, individually speaking. They've met all comers so far, and the game is on Kennedy's home turf at Kingston Stadium. So it's going to be a challenge. I think Cedar Falls has to find a way to shore up against the run. I think they have to reestablish their own ground game, try to control the clock a little bit, and again, stay away from the mistakes. I think those will be the key things to knocking off Kennedy this Friday.
A couple of interesting things. Kennedy doesn't try to fool you in any way. I mean, you know that Tyler Drawley is going to get the ball. He's carried it 201 times, which is more offensive touches than the rest of the team combined. There might even be twice as many. I mean, it's a lot more than anybody else. So they're going to get him the ball, and somehow teams have not been able to stop that. And then when they do throw, they're pretty effective with it. They average about 19 yards per completion. So you know what you're going to get with Kennedy, but so far nobody's been able to stop it. And with Cedar Falls, I just feel like this is a team that really hasn't figured out who it is yet. I just don't see this Tiger team with the type of identity that they've been able to establish in the past when they've, hung their hat on their defense or, their really physical play up front or their running game. I just don't see what this Cedar Falls team is trying to hang their hat on at this point. I mean, they're balanced and they have their moments. They do a lot of good things and they play some pretty good football, but there's just not one thing that stands out at me about this team. So I think they're still maybe trying to find their identity a little.
Yeah, it seems like they have all the pieces there. Without DeGroot, that probably hurt them a little bit against Linn-Mar, but that pass game, I thought, maybe that blitz took away what they wanted to do in the pass game, but they got 3 really good receivers, and Taylor Alexander throws a good ball. So, yeah, it was a little shocking to follow that game from Fargo and see that they were losing and that they lost. So it was, I think that they got the pieces there. Let's see if they can put it together. You're right, find that identity here.
It's probably also pertinent to point out that they don't have Ross Piersbacher or Ike Betker, up front clearing half of the Unidome out every time they run the ball, and so they don't have those type of offensive linemen apparently at this point.
They do have one Iowa commit. Spencer Williams is in there, and they do have tend to have a size advantage over most teams, but I'm not sure that's been enough so far. The problem maybe has been on the defensive side. Excuse me, Brad Revert early on was very concerned about that front seven, and at times they played well, and at times they've struggled a little bit. I think last weekend was a case where they struggled a little bit. They really didn't shut down Lindmar after those early moments in the first quarter. So I'm guessing if there's work to be done, most of it will be done on that side of the football.
All right, the other marquee type of game that I saw on the schedule for this week, Independence makes a trip to West Delaware. It's kind of a long-time rivalry to begin with, but frankly, it hasn't been a very competitive rivalry for most of the last decade or so. West Delaware's had the best of it. This might be different. Independence is undefeated. They're having a heck of a season. West Delaware's undefeated. They're both in the top 10. Unfortunately, the Mustangs have to go to Manchester, but looking forward to seeing how that game shakes out.
Yeah, it should be fun. And as you pointed out, you have two unbeaten teams in the district. Both of them should advance. I think by and large in that district, 3 spots are set with West Delaware, Independence, and Decorah. It's that 4th spot, I think, where you see something has to be settled yet. Key game in that regard this weekend is Crestwood and Waverly Shellrock. Both of those teams are 1-3, and they're fighting for that last spot. So the winner here gets a pretty huge advantage going forward, and it could set the lineup for that particular district. But again, Independence is a remarkable story. They've, I think, qualified for the playoffs one other times in the last 30 years, and here they are playing great football. West Delaware, we know, has been as good as it gets in football and many other sports, but it should be a fun matchup. Independence, I think, will see this as sort of a statement game. A game that here to show Iowa high school football that here we are, we've arrived, and there'll be plenty of motivation on that side, I would think.
This carries over to one other point that comes up from last weekend in the UNI North Dakota State game. North Dakota State, UNI is facing a 4th down and a long ways, and Sawyer Cole-Morgan is rolling out, UNI's quarterback. Doesn't get the first down, runs out of bounds, and then gets hit late out of bounds. North Dakota State gets a personal foul. The ruling is by the officials is that because it was a dead ball foul, the personal foul, UNI doesn't keep possession. The ball changes possession to North Dakota State. So basically, North Dakota State got a free cheap shot on the UNI quarterback with no real penalty. I mean, UNI was in position to kick a field goal too, that or even go in for a touchdown. I guess I can't remember how much time was left.
It was under 10 seconds. It was like 12. I think North Dakota State had 12 seconds left, and they took a knee. Yeah.
Another example, in my opinion, that of not wanting to let officials have any discretion to interpret things in the spirit of the rule. And why isn't that an extension of the offensive play if you rough the quarterback out of bounds?
It was. I thought it was rather unique too, because many times you see somebody run out of bounds, gets hit late, short of a first down, and they get a first down. This was the case. They ruled the play was over, and then he got hit because he was short of the first down, and it was a 4th down play. It was really weird, but basically what it opens up to with that interpretation is that if he comes short, you can hit him out of bounds, and all that's going to happen is you're going to get a 15-yard penalty, and you're still getting the ball. I mean, it was basically a license for a cheap shot.
The definition of when the play ends is what interests me about this.
Yes.
Because is a play over the minute he steps out of bounds? Because if it is, you're asking people to literally stop in their tracks.
Yeah.
And that's never going to happen. There was action going on. I assume Coleman was still moving when he was out of bounds. And by my definition, that play is still ongoing. The action is not officially stopped because he's still moving, the defenders are still moving, and
exactly.
You'll not convince me that play was over and this is post-possession. It's a continuation of the action on the field during that 4th down.
Basically, what that took away from UNI is they would have had the ball on the 20 with 12 seconds left, and I think they had a timeout or 2 left. They could have ran a play, thrown one in the end zone, went incomplete, and then had a chance to kick a field goal and be up by a touchdown at half. So it had some ramifications.
Yeah, interesting. Now, would that have been a different situation than if it was a roughing the passer penalty?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, you're talking about something that's happening in bounds. as opposed to something happening out of bounds. So I think those are two different situations. But be that as it may, the outcome, the ramifications are still the same in that your quarterback's getting hit. And if we want to talk about protecting players, you don't want to do anything that will encourage, theoretically, a quarterback from getting hit and or injured, which is exactly what happened in this case to Cole Morgan.
And ultimately, he got hit pretty hard a couple plays early and got up slowly. So I don't know, but I think the combination of then that hit, that basically took him out of the game. He had a concussion and failed the concussion protocol, which he did pass his first protocol on Sunday, and he had two more to pass, one on Monday and again another one today before he could return to practice. So.
Well, once again, I mean, it's a situation where I just think we're reluctant to let officials apply the rules in the spirit of the game. I mean, a lot of times we want them to apply it by hard, fast, written guidelines, whether or not they make there's any common sense behind them or not. That was an unfortunate play. The Utley slide is an unfortunate play simply because it shouldn't be allowed to begin with, but it has been an acceptable practice, and so what are you going to do about it now?
We did look up that they called it by the letter of law, and
Right.
by the rule book they called it exactly by the rule book. That's how it goes. The play was over, and you tack on the 50, or you take the 15 yards away and give the ball to the other team. We were surprised too because it sounded when we got the explanation, it didn't sound right.
Well, apparently we've talked a lot this morning, so we need to cut this off. As usual, our staff will be out and about at all sorts of events the rest of this week and this weekend. If you can't be there, you can read all about it online at www.wcfcourier.com or in our print editions. Otherwise, we will see you next week.